again, my suggestion would be that as a board we revisit annually, but sort of the policy agenda for the year based on the priority areas that this board has already set, which I think are really thoughtful and reflect the big buckets of work that we need to be thinking about in order to meet those student achievement goals. So these sort of more specific actionable items under the priority areas for 2016 should reflect not everything that we're interested in and want to do, but really should be our roadmap for 2016 on the things that we expect to do and take action on as a board, so that at the end of the year we can look back and say, you know, how did we do in terms of actually accomplishing those specific items under the priority areas for 2016, and then think forward towards 2017 at that point about, you know, how that needs to change for next year. So again, my thinking is that it's both sort of the long game and the short game in terms of our student achievement anchors that we're tracking towards, and you know, looking at our progress each year towards those goals, in addition to sort of the priority areas and the specific items that we want to take action on as a board each year. That still resonate, sound right in terms of an approach? Okay, so
we need to recognize that is kind of a change in the past. The master plan has kind of been a 10-year plan, if you will, as opposed to a one-year plan that we're working with here. Now you've got some elements of both here, but it's important to recognize that we're really talking primarily about a one-year plan that has some longer-term elements in it.
Right, and I would expect that some of the things under the priority areas will continue on next year. We'll just want to intentionally sort of determine that together each year to make sure that we're still, you know, again, it serves as our work plan at the staff level too. We need to make sure we're clear from the board what are the things that we should be working towards each year. So it does reflect a change in sort of format for the master plan. Everybody should have a hard copy, so we'll start walking through, and I've asked Tess to keep us honest on time because, you know, we could talk about this all day and I would actually love to, but we're going to be a little time limited this morning. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at it a bit already. May need a copy because we can make
Yeah, I didn't got it on the computer.
Have any
I didn't bring it.
extras or
In the
access?
packets.
Yeah.
Give them their packets.
Oh, we've got that coming. So as you're opening up or just getting it, let's start by looking at the first page with the state board's vision, guiding principles, and strategic priority areas. The only thing that has changed here since we last discussed and you voted on first reading was to pull up a few things into guiding principles that sort of lay a foundation for all of our work as opposed to setting them out specifically as priority areas. So two things you'll note there. The vision statement is the same. Maintaining our position as the fastest improving state in the nation, as well as entering the top half of all states on student outcomes by 2020. Again, this means the board must develop and maintain policies that ensure a clear focus on student success. That vision statement has not changed. The guiding principles serve all students in transparency, though, again, I think undergird or should undergird everything that we're about as a board. So the serve all students and the transparency pieces we've listed here now as guiding principles, as commitments that should infuse all of our work. Then you'll see instead of 5 strategic priority areas, we have 4, again, as voted on by the board last October: high quality school options, great teachers and leaders, high standards and quality measures, and public engagement and oversight. And I'm just going to assume that you will stop me as we go here, as you have thoughts, comments, etc. Any thoughts, comments on that specifically, and just that change, particularly on having serve all students and transparency as guiding principles? Good. Okay. Then we'll go through the student achievement goals and revisit this. I already have a few notes, like I said, about feedback that we've received, particularly on this first goal. So again, Tennessee will rank in the top half of states on the National Assessment of Educational Progress by 2020. Fielding and I were just discussing, you know, NAEP is administered every 2 years, so that's actually either a 2019 or a 2021 administration, depending on how we want to think about it as a board. I believe the department is thinking about it in terms of 2019. Kathleen's here, and of course, you know, I'm going to put you on the spot. Kathleen, 2019 is how you all are tracking towards that. So that's a choice we can make. I've been thinking 2019 as sort of the last administration for this round of goals, but happy to do that however you all. Wendy's nodding.
Earlier is better, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think, you know, we want to continue to see progress on NAEP, right. So it's whether we want to anchor ourselves in that 2019 or 2021 test. 2019, okay. And the results of that 2019 administration usually come out in late fall that year, so it'd be at the end of 2019 that we would know ahead of 2020. Now, you'll see the graphs down here. One thing that we've discussed, and the chairman was the one that brought this up, if it's possible to update this with the most recent NAEP data from 2015, we'd like to do that for this report. These graphs don't reflect that, but that would be one of the changes that I think would make sense to make if that feels right to everyone else.
Yes.
Okay. That one?
Update the graphs with recent.
With the 2015 NAEP. Anything else from that goal or those graphs in particular?
Yeah. So is there like a one sentence explanation of what happened in 2011?
We became the fastest improving state in the nation on NAEP. Is that what you,
Well,
or by 2013, between 2011 and 2013?
well,
What
it
do you-
was 39, 39, 38, 41, 41, 46, 45. Something took an ugly turn and then we bounced back, or started to bounce back. Okay.
It's probably not one sentence, but
it was
it's
a
something we
retort.
could, I mean, is it something you'd want to see in the plan,
No,
just more for your
No, I
own
was-
understanding?
So you and staff did exactly what I was hoping you would do. You did a trajectory, and you did, even though we're hitting mid-level in the country, which incidentally, if we were a football team, would be fired. But it is an aggressive trajectory, as we asked. It's more of a comment than it's exactly what we asked. It is going to take a lot of people willing to pass and do things a lot differently to meet these projections. And I think that's why we set it. They're not some sort of aspiration.
No, these are hard goals.
Yes.
I would totally agree.
One thing we need to recognize that when we update these graphs with the 2015 data, the graphs are going to appear a lot differently. For instance, on fourth grade math, we are at 25. I mean, we have achieved it on fourth grade math with the NAEP data, and you know, the fourth grade reading is going the other direction to make it appear not quite as nice smooth line after the year. So the graphs will appear a little bit differently than the ones that we got.
It's a good point. And I think, again, as we think towards our goals next year under the priority areas, it's going to give us some additional direction. I mean, we're going to hear from the department next and the governor middle of next month on some early literacy initiatives. And I think, you know, again, this year, we had that in our plan initially around sort of early grade reading and how are we thinking about literacy. There's still more we have to study and really understand about what's working and what's not there. And then I think, again, for 2017, I would imagine that would be something that we would want to see under a priority area for the board to take action on. It didn't quite get it into 2016 because it's still not clear what we need to do yet to address that. But I think the chairman's right. I mean, the data should really be guiding our priorities each year. And if we see changes like on the fourth grade reading, that should sort of be a call to action for us. Okay, in the interest of time, let's look at goal 2. These next two really speak to sort of the need for all of our students to be ready for post-secondary and career.
Are we going to change on goal 1 on the statement on goal 1? Are we going to change that 2020 to 2019, or leave it at 2020 with the understanding that we're based on 2019 data?
Good question. How would you prefer? We can change it to 2019 to be sort of clear about the administration.
I think that unless we put 19, there's a real good chance 6 months or a year from now, we're gonna have a hard time remembering what our discussion was today.
And we'll be looking at 2021 data?
Or just write down whatever we want it to be, and that way my dementia doesn't have to recall.
All right, I'm hearing we should probably just say what we mean there and say 2019. Call that clearly. Sorry, I didn't mean to rush this either. Are there other thoughts or changes in addition to updating the slides or the graphs for 2015 data? Anything else you want to see differently on this goal? Okay. Then, as I was starting to say, the next two goals really are geared at making sure that we are tracking towards student success that prepares them for post-secondary and the workforce. So ACT is obviously an important measure of readiness, and it's a hard number to move. As we've seen over the past few years in Tennessee, moving from just a few, like fractions of a percent is actually significant growth, but it's still not getting us where we need to be. So to Mike's point, this is another one that I think is super aggressive. It's achievable, but it also is going to require a lot of work and a lot of really intentional direction at the high school level in particular. So we've also included the equivalent SAT score to an ACT 21. If our goal is to have an average 21 by 21 or by 2020, there are more students now taking the SAT as well, and I think it's appropriate to sort of put the equivalent SAT score, if that still feels right, to the board. But any thoughts on this goal? Yes.
And this is probably a bigger discussion, and it's a discussion I want to have with the department, but I received a pretty disturbing call this morning from one of the superintendents in my district, who learned yesterday from the department that there are 18 districts that are apparently not complying with 100% students taking the ACT, and that some of the districts are as low as 60%. And his concern that what was going to be done about that, because it's a violation of law and policy, and that our numbers may not be accurately reflecting all students. So I would like to see, first of all, again, I have some questions from the department on that, but I would like to see us have some language here that reflects that this will be all students and that it will really be all students. And I don't know what that looks like. I'm happy to try to draft something while we're having the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I just think, I mean, I am very proud of the state for our number going up, but if it's going up because kids are being counseled not to come for the test or kids aren't being tested, then that's a problem.
Kathleen's nodding. I completely agree, and I think we can call that out specifically. If you want to think about language, I mean, there's a couple places there where we could clearly indicate in the text above the graph that the average to 21 with all students, sitting for the test, or however we want to put it in there. But I think that's, again, and that speaks to sort of serve all students as an undergirding principle. It needs
And the transparency.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
I can share a little bit about that conversation if helpful.
Yeah.
We were with the TOS accountability group yesterday, and as you all may know, ACT is now a part of our accountability structure with the federal government, so we will be measuring. So we have been doing a lot of investigation of looking at districts on the actual take of students across the state, meaning how many students are taking the test by district. And, the good thing is about 80% of our districts are doing what they are supposed to, but there are those that are not. And they are going to be called out publicly for not doing what they're supposed to do. And then the following year, there will be a 95% participation rate goal, just as we have for all of our other tests. But in year one, because we're putting this on the report card and we're looking at lag data, we're probably going to use a lower number than 95% because districts will, certainly be concerned we did not inform them that all these students should be taking the test. So it was a pretty large discussion yesterday, but the consensus was in agreement with the state opinion that we need to call these districts out for not participating as they should.
That's helpful, Kathy. Could you add just one last point there about, to your knowledge, what students would potentially not be eligible for various reasons? I mean, when we say all students, there are actually some small
It should be
fraction that
very
are not.
much similar to how we do our testing criteria for students with disabilities, that 1% of the population may be excluded from a state mandated test, so we'll use that same criteria.
Okay, but ELL students and other, I mean, there's,
yeah, absolutely.
right, just to be, so the board understands, I mean, it's a very small percentage that are actually not required to take it.
And I appreciate that, and that is consistent with what I heard. And again, this is probably not the conversation for now, but I just want it to be said that they all know that the law is 100%. So I will have some concerns and questions for the department about why we're giving them another year to get to that when they've known it, it's been the law. And I
No,
know,
we're not giving them another year. We're putting them on notice. But what I meant by lag time, like our grad rate, is the year's data prior to this year that goes on the report card. So it's actually last year's data that will go on this year's report card. So we are giving them notice now that next year, your participation rate will be published at this required 95%.
So will that mean that 5% of the districts won't take the ACT?
No. What that
Okay.
means, in our exclusion rate right now, there's an attendance requirement that is in alignment to federal law, that 95% participation rate is a requirement for all students in a district to be included in a state mandated test. And if districts don't hit that 95, then that's, they are in need of improvement on our notification to them that they have not met this desired number. So we're planning for this administration, which is February, there'll probably be a February and a later spring administration of ACT, that districts will be notified that 95% is the number they have to hit this year.
So I have a clarifying question. Do we have any idea how many students did not take the ACT? Because the question, why I'm asking that is, then the numbers on this page are not reflective of reality. And so how do we really know that we can achieve 21? It's already a stretch. And so all students taking it as they should could lower the number that's reflected on these pages today. So do we have any idea how many students have not taken?
There are folks at the department who have that idea. I don't have that
I can
idea.
probably get that though.
We have the number, it's going to be published in the report card.
No, is this something that you all have to track annually?
Districts reported to us and we have that data.
But it seems like it ought to be loaded and there be, you hit a button and it shows all the districts,
Well,
if there's a big blank spot.
my understanding is the way that they're having to track it is because we don't administer the ACT. I mean, students come to our schools and take the ACT, but it's not our test, like a state test. So what they're having to do is look at the number of seniors in each graduating class as compared to the number of students who actually took the ACT. So that's how they're coming to the number through two views. But the reality is, Mike, districts need to start doing this.
And if y'all can put it digitally, you can see with one big picture if there's any big gaps at any one time.
Yes, you will have a view of this in our next report card that will be quite surprising, and certain districts will be called out explicitly for not doing what they're supposed to be doing by law.
Caroline, I just had one more question
Uh-huh.
for you. Can you give us a general information about the size of the districts that we're talking about? Are these large districts? Are they small districts? Or do you have
It's
that
a mix.
information? It's mixed.
And I don't have, they did not share the names of the districts or the number of students yesterday. It was shared in percentages. If you have interest, maybe Sarah could get with Nikita to get that very
We can
specific
follow up.
information.
I think also to Lillian's point, I mean, I think, 21 obviously is sort of known as the college readiness marker for ACT. That's how that goal was set, and I think that still should be the goal. It may be more challenging though to get there with the increased participation rate. I don't know if people have thoughts about whether we would want to back away from that or set it still for 2020.
21 is the minimum college readiness. So I certainly wouldn't recommend lowering that number, because if you can get a 21 on the ACT, you still can't get into most of the colleges in the state.
It is worth revisiting that 21 is an average of English, reading, math, and science. And as I recall, unless they've adjusted it, that if you score an 18 for some reason in English, a 21 in reading, a 22 in math, and a 24 in science, which averages to 21, but you score on those subsets, you have a 50% chance of making a B or better in those freshman courses in college and a 75% chance of making a C or better in those freshman years. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we're really not talking about MIT here, not to be flippant, but it's an important number, but
Two quick things. We'll commit to getting back to the board with some numbers based on the department's new information. Sounds like we want to leave 21 as is, but I do want to note that in terms of annual sort of reports and data metrics that we'll want to look at, the sub-scores are going to be important to look at too. It's not, I mean, the composite is the goal, 21, but we want to look and see where we are, just like with NAEP on those sort of specific sub-scores.
Sarah, can I add one more thing? One thing that will support our goal of 21, the state has the same goal of 21, is there is a bill proposed that has to do with a retake for all students in ACT at the state's expense. And right now, students who are economically disadvantaged can have that retake for no cost, but there are a lot of other students who don't. So we have a bill proposed this year that everybody would get a retake, and then that would be the number to help us climb to a 21. Because we do know that when students retake this test, they generally do better the second time.
Thank you for, and I know the commissioner is going to give a report on the assessment task force. I know that's one of the recommendations, and that is an important thing to know.
I am glad you addressed the economically disadvantaged student, because when you come from an area like Shelby, that's what you're talking about, the majority of your students. And it is important to retake, but it's important that the economically disadvantaged student has the ability to do it.
I think it's important for us to recognize, one, I think we ought to stay with the 21. I think, for a number of reasons, that's a good place to be, but you got to recognize the problem with that is that it's very much an average. To start with, the point that Mike just made, it's an average of 4 different subject areas, which causes a problem. We really want all kids to get to that minimum on each one of those 4 subject areas. That's what we really want to happen. Also, it's an average too, because it doesn't address the distribution that you've got around, and would be a better measure. They have something that says we're going to have all kids, or, some way represent what we want in terms of distribution, just not the average. But I'm not suggesting we complicate it by getting into all that at this point.
Well, I think what that makes me think as we move to goal 3, it's no one goal around student achievement is going to sort of paint the whole picture of what we're trying to achieve as a state. So I think, again, having these 3 goals that triangulate kind of the picture for us is going to be important. And this next one, really is anchored in the Tennessee Promise Initiative. And we talked about, a lot of that yesterday with THEC, but I think it is ultimately about, are our students prepared for success post high school? What does that look like? Are they able to have options and take advantage of those options in post-secondary? So this next one, while I think probably the most challenging in terms of it's the most lagging goal, and there's going to be a lot of need to look at leading indicators because we're talking about the graduating class of 2020 here. This really reflects the state's commitment to ensuring that all students are prepared really for post-secondary and the workforce. And so, having an ambitious goal that says approximately 2/3 of high school graduates will be enrolled in post-secondary right now, and less than 1/3 is complete. The drive to 55 is quite ambitious. We've had some conversations on some of the one-on-one calls about how to make sure this goal and the sort of graphs down there really reflect what we're talking about. And I think that one on the left potentially needs a little more information to be clear about what we're looking at in terms of the first leading indicator of this goal. But I think this is one in particular where we'll have to look each year as a board at some of the leading indicators, because we won't have data on the graduating class of 2020 for 4 to 6 years after that. So looking at the Tennessee Promise numbers like we saw from THEC yesterday, and the enrollment data for each graduating class, those persistence rates, the number of students taking advantage of the Promise Initiative, all of those are things that on an annual basis, we're going to be wanting to look at as a board to see if we're really tracking towards this ultimate goal of readiness. I'll stop there though, and what other thoughts or comments do folks have on this one? We'll go with Mike in the middle.
We deal with averages. It's really the only way to really look at this thing. But there really is another way to look at it at some point. We might want to do it. because it's chilling. If we were to look at the raw number of kids, the raw actual number represented in 42%, which are tens of thousands, it would be chilling. Because that's really, those are in, they become real people. They become, they're, each is an individual that is coming up without a really bright future, and something happened. Even reducing it dramatically to 24%, that raw number is really chilling still. So every time we look at these, it's helpful to understand that each one of these numbers behind it has people that are going to be left on the sidelines. And right now, there's a shameful number that are being left on the sidelines. So,
And we can, I'll defer to the graphic designer over here in terms of what's possible, but we could, I like that point, and I think it's important. We could figure out if there's a way to incorporate in counts either sort of as a subtext there or somehow, because it does become real when you think about it in terms of in count numbers of students as opposed to percentages.
Well, first of all, these are ambitious, but I think appropriate goals, and I think they're well stated. Along the way, obviously, we're going to see a number of environmental factors that we may want to footnote. Just one little factor about test scores. Trending now is text optional. All the elite colleges are discarding it for some biases that are clearly documented. I don't know how much steam that's going to pick up. It is some, and how that will affect, students' test taking when she's got a heart 7 MIT and doesn't want to take the test. I don't know that N is going to be large enough to even matter, but just I think we may want to footnote that. My main question, which can come later, is just as a new board member. Mike made a comment of obviously the system has to change to produce different results. How will we as a board, or do we as a board, Mr. Chairman, get reports on the system improvement underway? This won't just happen because we all want it to. Requires a lot of experiments, probably a lot of changes. And where do we get periodically pictures of how that's going?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a big thorny question because I think, again, when you think about how we're going to, as a state, get to these ambitious goals, there is not a silver bullet. There's not one thing we can look at to say we're on track. I think as we get into the policy sort of priority discussion, that's where we need your help in being strategic about what are the things we should be calling for and looking at each year that we think are going to drive us towards those results. And if it was as easy as saying it's definitely these things, it'd be a lot easier to bring you those reports. But I think we have to get as close as we can to triangulating the information around the things that we think matter. I mean, we know the teacher in the classroom, the leader in the school has an outsized impact on student achievement. We need to be looking at those human capital policies, and we're going to spend a lot of the afternoon today hearing from colleagues at the department on some of those key issues about how we're using data to really understand where we have human capital success and challenges. I mean, certainly on the metrics, we're going to be looking annually at a lot of leading indicators, especially around this goal. So I think that'll help us know whether we're, and that's why we have to look annually and not just wait till 2020 to see where we are. But I don't know, does anybody else have an answer to add to that? Again, I think it's the right question to ask, absolutely. It's just harder to answer.
I don't have an answer, but I do have a question. Do you want to wait for an answer?
Well, if anybody else has an answer, or it's part of an answer.
Obviously, everything that we're doing, from the standards, the curriculum standards, to, what we're doing with teacher preparation, across the board, we need to be looking at each one of those things and how they will contribute to achieving this, and make sure that our decisions on each one of those policy areas are aligned with trying to achieve this objective. That's the way we drive it. That's the only driver we have.
So the question that I have speaks to students who are taking they're dually enrolled, dual credit. Would we be capturing students that graduate with a 2-year degree or certification, because that's happening today across all the districts? Or are we strictly talking about those when they graduate, after graduation? there
I'll
some that do?
confirm this, but my understanding is that those, if they are achieving a post-secondary certificate or degree, that they are captured in these numbers. And I think, again, that's another leading indicator to look at is what's our participation rate in AP and other sort of college showing courses, dual enrollment. Those students who, the research shows take those kind of courses in high school have a much more likely chance of going on to high school and being successful, or to college and being successful. But my sense is that those numbers are captured if they complete a certificate as part of a high school program. Happy to hear any other thoughts or questions, but I just want to stop and recap what I'm hearing on this side so we can make sure we have it for the minutes and that we're making these changes. If possible, we're going to add in counts to the percentages on the left. We're going to also make sure that as much as possible that graph in particular is clear. We may need to add a little more information to be sure that it's intuitive upon first glance. And
Let me make sure I understand exactly what these graphs are. The first one says that 42% of the 2014 graduating class are not enrolled in any kind of post-secondary education. 35% went to a four-year college and on down. That's what it's supposed to. And then the next one is that for the class of 2008, 6 years in 2014, only 24% had a post-secondary degree.
of some kind.
And that's either a 2-year, 4-year, or
Certificate. That's exactly right.
Is it, I'm sorry, would it be helpful to have, I don't know the terminology, if it's an indicator or a part of this graph, I'm really interested in that 24%, breaking that down. How many of those people have a 4-year degree? How many have,
Oh, yeah. We can have supplementary sort of graphs to the sort of high level plan, but absolutely, yeah, that information exists and is, readily available to share.
Okay, so this, going back to the raw numbers, which the 42% currently. So much of, we know that public education is a function of the local support at each LEA. And there's a lot of folks who think everything's going okay. And therefore, there's not that urgency to really make sure they're getting the support they need. In order to get this statewide number, it has to be a computation of, it has to be the aggregate of all of those districts. If we could have each district's number that failed to hit 21, which means each district's raw number of those who are not ready to go to the next. And we make sure those districts are on the website. Every district, how many raw number kids are ready to go? I saw that for Knox County. And even at a very successful high school, one of the flagships, it's kind of startling the actual number that are below that, where everybody thinks they're, So I think if we can help inform these local areas better about what their needs are, we might see more local support for public education.
Yeah, two thoughts to follow up on that really excellent point. I think Kathleen can speak to what is in the works potentially on how that data will be shared on future report cards. And my sense is that we're moving to a place where a lot of that will be publicly available and shared through some of the report cards and other websites, but we can have that conversation with the right folks at the department. And then I think the other thing that it sort of says to me is that, it's hard to eat the elephant in one bite, but we've got board members representing regions across the state, and for us at the board staff level to bring information to you about your districts, the ones that you represent in a regional sort of profile, I think would also be really powerful and helpful to you, because again, as unpaid board members, the time you spend is at your decision. But, I know getting out and having conversations like Wendy, you indicated this morning, even with superintendents and Mike and others, I know you're all having those conversations locally. That matters. People will listen. And I think that it's a collective effort there. So we can commit to bringing regional sort of data profiles based on your representative areas. And then I think we can continue to talk with the department about how much of that data that you mentioned about ACT specifically is sort of driving the public conversation.
And one thing I wanted to mention is I know the comptroller has worked on an interactive map
Yep.
that pulls up by
Congressional.
I'm not sure if it's congressional. I think I know for sure it's
They're
House
working
and-
on it though. They are
But
working
they
on
are working on it. So I think that once it's by congressional district, you'll be able to pull up and see and then click on all the schools and the school districts in your district. You can see their accountability data. It's really going to be an amazing map. So I think once they get there, we can certainly make sure that y'all have that information.
What's the timeline on that?
Well, they've got it by
It's-
state senate district.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think some of it's already operational.
Well, somebody has to really figure out a very effective way to push that out into every parent's consciousness. Got to get them off Donkey Kong and looking at this stuff, because it really is an informative, it will change people's opinions. That's been gone a while.
Okay, yeah, let's move
right.
right along.
In the interest of time, and I should just note too, our formal official workshop starts at 11. We had scheduled to break at 10:30 at the board's discretion. We can go a little over, but I just want to note we're a little over time. Tess, I know, is probably about to tell me, but okay. But let's move on to the next sort of policy levers and the specific actions that the board is going to commit to in 2016. And again, just to reiterate, this does not include the kitchen sink of the things that we care about that we want to study. There's a lot of things that we need to study this year and then take action on. But these are the things that we as a board are committing to doing in 2016 that we hope and think and sort of believe will move us closer to those numbers that we just discussed on student achievement. So Tess, you want to start on high quality school options? And we might start by talking about one change that we've already been suggesting to reorder, lead with the charter school work and have as the follow-up the individual education accounts.
Yeah, so as Sarah said, I think we're going to move the charter pieces up and the individual education pieces down, just because in terms of the work of the board, this does take up much more of our time than the individual education accounts does. So what I'm going to do is just do a brief overview of kind of the two buckets that the board undertakes as an appellate authorizer. We do have a kind of authorization update for you all at the end of this morning session. So I'm going to keep it very high level because we're going to get into a few more details at this end of this morning session. But in terms of being an appellate authorizer, that really means that we have two distinct roles within the kind of the charter school bucket. The first is our appeal process. And, really making sure that we are in line with national best practices. So since 2014, we have adopted a number of different processes to make sure we are in line with those national best practices. So at this point, it's really about kind of refining what that process looks like. So focusing in on do we need to make changes to policies around kind of refinement of the appeal process? For example, we have some refinements up for first reading for you all on Friday for our charter school appeal process. Secondly, a huge part of our appeal work is around the review committee members. And I think we have a very good foundation of people who've done it with us for 2 years now, but we want to continue to think about how do we recruit and retain and train those people to be really the eyes and the ears of the application process, in addition to the staff. And finally, on appeals, we are in a constant, how can we do this better? And we really want to engage the participants in the appeal process, so the sponsors, the LEAs, and the review committee, to really get a sense of what is working, what was unclear, and what can we do better. So we did that process in the fall and got a lot of great feedback, which is why we're bringing some changes to you all on Friday. But also we want to continue that in this year and really kind of after the appeal process is over, have a reflection time for the staff and to talk to the stakeholders to see if is there anything else that we can improve upon. I will move to authorization, and then I'll kind of open it up to the board for any feedback of kind of high-level things we need to focus on. Again, the 2016 is really about us getting ready for opening a school in 2017, 2018 with KIPP Nashville Primary. So we will be doing a lot of kind of the foundational work of this process over the year. So the first thing that's on our master plan goal for this bucket is a performance contract. So that is a key best practice, that the board has a performance contract with any operator of a school that's been authorized. Secondly, we're going to continue to build out those authorization practices. So really understanding what are our responsibilities both as an authorizer and as an LEA. And those are two key buckets. And we want to make sure that we understand everything and be able to fulfill those responsibilities appropriately. And finally, starting in the fall, we will have our pre-opening year with KIPP Nashville Primary. So there are a number of different tasks that have to be completed to be ready to go in October 2017. So that will be another significant focus for us to get everything ready to go for a school opening in 2017. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions about other things that we feel like we need to have at a high level in the master plan on this bucket. Yes.
So just based on one of the things you said, I would suggest in number 2, which I guess is now going to be number 1, the appeal process. Yeah. The third section, you mentioned that you got feedback from the LEAs and the sponsors, so you may just want to add that, and it says gather feedback from committee members. I would just add those two in there since you're already doing that. And then my question on authorization is, I know, KIPP did that deferral year. In most situations, you are probably going to be opening the school that, like, you're going to have the 1 year and not the 2 years. And is there anything you need to have in here for you guys about developing that timeline? I know it'll get easier after you do one.
Yeah.
But is there anything you need to be thinking about when the timeline is faster, if you need to be developing that?
No, I think that's a great idea. And actually, one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit more later is really us, as we are kind of fleshing out what all these responsibilities are, and is putting together what does the yearly cadence look like, so that we can know on a staff perspective, what do we need to be gearing up for? What do we need on a yearly basis? What is our responsibility going to look like, so that we can make sure that we are mapping that out? So certainly, I think that's a great idea, and we can think about how we kind of insert some wording around that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
Great. Nathan, you want to talk us through briefly, Elizabeth, there on IEAs?
Sure. Just as a quick overview for anyone who might not be familiar with IEAs, which is individualized education accounts. It was established by the General Assembly in 2015, and it'll be implemented in 2017. And basically what it does is it redirects pupil funding for participating students with certain disabilities. Those are the students with IEPs and certain delineated disabilities. And the funding will be placed into a personal account. And that account can be used to pay for educational expenses that will be tailored to meet the student's individual needs. So this really fits into the serve all students, right? We want to make sure that we're serving those students, including this subset of the student population, because when we're talking about the IEAs, we're dealing with a subset of students, a special population of students who have certain disabilities. So they're a vulnerable population when we look at, the pupils across the state of Tennessee. With that, the state board obviously has some responsibilities under this law. And one of them is the rulemaking process, which you guys have been in the process of and have developed some draft rules, which are up for a final reading at this upcoming meeting.
Actually, some of these points on there is we're talking about the finalizing the rule recommendations and all of that, and conducting a public hearing. Well, the public hearing took place on November 12th. The rule recommendations with taking that into account were done by January 15th. And so we're already in a good spot on that.
Right. And the rules, of course, were developed in consultation with the Department of Education and the Department of Health. And of course, there's going to be ongoing review concerning these rules and ongoing monitoring of the program, which I think Nathan is going to speak to.
So there's a couple of pieces that I've heard from board member conversation and as well as Sarah's concentration to make sure that when looking at this program, we try to determine its effectiveness through some benchmarking. One of the things that we've done is work with TDOE on every step of the process. Their internal advisory group, their external advisory group, both our current and our former general counsel have played a role in the rule crafting process as well as the rule making process. And one of the goals that we have there is to create a parent handbook by the spring of 2016, and that's already in draft form. The department isn't quite ready to release that to the public yet, but that's something that we are working very closely with them on. So the piece on what is the oversight and how are we going to determine if it's an effective program or not. Again, the department has worked extremely closely with us, and one of the things that we've been very pleased with is that they're going to put together an effectiveness report and bring it to this board on an annual basis. So starting in January of next year, we're going to hear a report based on aggregated student data, the number of participating schools, computer hardware pre-approval, curriculum pre-approval, the transfer data, withdrawal data, removal data, renewal data, post-secondary matriculation data, all of this as it relates to that program. And so we've been pretty pleased every step of the way, and they know that you all are watching this with great interest.
We'll stop there, take comments or thoughts before we move to the next priority area. But I think in this case, again, this one rose to the level of master plan in my eyes, but happy to have that sort of debated because of the nature of the student population. And again, the fact that, as Elizabeth was mentioning, they are super vulnerable. I think there's a lot we don't know about a program like this. And so, like Nathan said, my biggest focus has been to study it and make sure from the outset that we know who's participating, what that looks like, what are the effects. I mean, we just have to keep a lot of sunlight on it to make sure that this very vulnerable population of students under this program gets the services that they need. And it's not a lot of money that they get. So that's been sort of our biggest focus. But any thoughts, feedback on any of that?
I have a question. Is it still scheduled to begin January 2017?
Yes, ma'am. So the law required that it commenced next academic year. But in order, the law also said that we could not do any expedited rulemaking process, okay? So we had to be extremely inclusive, not only with the Department of Health, but the board and the department working on this jointly, as well as the internal and external advisory groups. So you're talking about all the stakeholder organizations had to get involved. So one of the results of that extended process is that it cannot be rolled out at the beginning of the next academic year, but the second semester.
And are we going to be aware of how parents are held accountable with these things?
Yeah, we're going to have, like I said, at least annual reports. We have at least every 2 weeks, there's a meeting that takes place on all of these surrounding issues. I will tell you that we had a meeting with all of the states that have a similar program out in Colorado. It was a one-day workshop put on out there. And the consensus was that as far as all of the states that have a similar program, that our sets of rules that are being proposed tomorrow were the most comprehensive and kind of, prevented the most traps from being fallen into, I guess is the best way to put it. So, but in terms of information, it'll be constant and forthcoming from the department.
I mean, I just want to say, I think this is absolutely something that rises to the level of master plan, and I applaud all the work that's gone into it, both from the department and from the board level. I think there's a lot of potential, there are a lot of risks, and these are kids that really need our focus, so I'm glad it's here.
Great.
Okay, with that, then we'll move to great teachers and leaders, and I'm going to ask Laura to walk us through the highlights of this section.
All right, so the first policy lever that you'll notice under the Great Teachers and Leaders strategic priority is the teacher preparation report card report card redesign. And so I know I spoke about this ever so briefly yesterday at the THEC joint meeting, but that's going to be one of the key areas of focus for us this 2016 year, is the transition of the report card back over to the State Board of Education, and we're charged with the production of that in statute from THEC, who used to previously produce that report card. And with that, I think, comes a new focus to the report card. So right now, the report card has looked relatively the same since it was first produced several years ago. And I think it's difficult for that report card to really serve all of the multiple different stakeholder audiences that seek to gain information from it. So right now, it's serving as a resource for education and preparation providers. It's also, our goal is for it to serve as a resource for districts who are thinking about who they're hiring new teachers from, as well as candidates who are interested in entering a teacher preparation program. And so right now, given the just very detailed data that's in that report card, it's really hard for that report card to serve all those different audiences well. And so we have a really exciting opportunity this upcoming year to do a lot of redesign work on the report card and to really make it the external facing kind of districts being the key audience, prospective candidates for programs being the key audience. And then we've got, which I'll talk about in just a second, under the second policy lever, the new educator preparation policy has got some more detailed, granular reporting that is really going to help provide the education preparation providers with that really detailed information that they've been seeking all along. And so we'll be able to have these two different reports that will have alignment in their metrics and the definitions of those metrics that we use, but will be reported with kind of a unique eye towards different audiences. So we've got a lot of work to do on the report card to get it there by the November 1st deadline in which we're supposed to release it this fall. But one of the first things that we plan on doing is really working with a lot of stakeholder groups and doing a series of focus groups to just gain information around kind of current perspectives and attitudes about the previous report card we've had, as well as ask some probing questions about what information and what types of data displays and analytics would be helpful for people to see in a new report card. So that's work that we'll be kicking off here in the next month or so. And then we'll be doing a lot of work to actually do the redesign process. So defining those metrics, making sure that they are aligned with what's going to be the annual reports from the Department of Education, and then also making sure that it's just really user-friendly. And one of the processes we've already started on that user-friendly piece is to redesign the data collection protocol we have for the education preparation providers that get sent out to them. And so we're seeking to just enhance a lot of the clarity of that process to make sure that we get really high quality data to feed this report card. And then finally, as I mentioned before, that redesign will be complete by November 1st, 2016 launch. Happy to take any questions about the report card.
So what you're describing is basically taking a report that has been of value to teacher ed programs and expanding it to a consumer guide that anyone can pick up and get very valuable information. Like if you're a high school graduate wanting to go into teaching, you should be able to look at this guide and see which programs are going to prepare you the best in that profession. And you can make a knowledgeable decision as to where you're going to not only go, but where you're likely to borrow money and take on student debt to go. So this thing, and their parents. So this thing really is huge. It is so great that it's, and like you said, user friendly. This thing is a big piece.
And the big piece of it is you got output data as opposed to just the input data.
Right.
I have to add, because I have to tell you, Mike and others, this is something I'm really excited about this year. I think it's a huge opportunity. It allows the board to really put our mark on what we want. It's our report. We're bringing it back to the board. We're building the capacity. We're thrilled to have Spencer to help from our staff side and Laura's direction. But I think to Mike's description, it really could be so much more in terms of an external facing consumer friendly report. It's both what he described. It's also for districts and the hiring side. It should both make them pause in their current hiring practices if need be based on the sources that they're getting their teachers, and it should drive conversations regionally about what do we need to do to increase the quality supply side? So I think it's a huge opportunity. It's also really ambitious, and the timeline is going to be aggressive, and we're going to make it happen, but it's going to take a lot of work.
Yes, and just to add, just to kind of make that customer-friendly piece come alive a little bit more. So right now, when you access the report card, you're looking at PDFs, either a statewide profile PDF or an individual program PDF. We're now hoping to switch that to a web-based reporting system, so it will be clickable. You can drill down into different pieces of data. And as the chairman said, outcome data is already included as a part of the report card, but if you look at it now, you're looking at a series of pluses and minuses and T-score or T-values that are listed in the reporting of that. That's not very, customer friendly if you're not in the weeds on what all of the different TVOS data means. So we've got a long road ahead of us to figure out how do we kind of roll some of this up and really make it at a usable, understandable level. And so I think we're going to make great strides this first year, but as with anything, I think it will, make yearly tweaks after that and really try to get it and have some focus groups and some feedback on the back end to figure out how we can improve it even more.
We also got to figure out how to push it out where more people know that it's there to use.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment on that. I think it's terrific, very exciting. But in terms of driving change, I don't know how much thought's been given or how much resources have been available to a communication plan. Before coming to the board, I saw this. It's kind of episodic. It's a great one-day news story and create some buzz. Really, it certainly did in Memphis, but then it was sort of gone. And this is something that has to be resourced. It's fairly complicated, and maybe a little thought to, if we're going to create our vision is going to come to life, how we resource the communication across the state.
It's only going to be as good as the stakeholders, the number of stakeholders that read.
Yep. Exactly right, and I do agree. I think particularly if we're trying to target the change in district hiring practice, it's going to take a lot of work. Working closely with the teams at the department that focus on human capital initiatives to make sure that we're able to partner some resources to really get this in the hands of districts and some tools and some strategies on how they can use this information. And so I do think that is something that is definitely in our minds, but perhaps we need to enhance that focus.
Just a thought, we might get a group like Ingram Group or someone to donate services. This is such an important thing for the public good to help push this out, which takes a lot of resources to get this where we'd like to get it. It's very exciting.
I totally agree, though. We're going to put the work in and make it something that we're really proud of, and we want people to see. We need to also do the additional work to make sure people actually see it.
All right, with that, I'll move on to the second key policy lever, which is the revised educator preparation program accountability. And so this really is a complement to the work that will be happening on the report card. But last fall, in October of 2014, the board approved some significant revisions to the educator preparation policy that really shifted into including more outcomes data as a part of the comprehensive review process for education preparation providers. And so now much of our time is spent working really closely with the department as they seek to implement this policy. And so you'll hear a really comprehensive update on this work later on this afternoon from the commissioner and from Amy Wooten, who's the executive director of the team that's charged with implementing this. But just to let you all know, Amy and I spend a great deal of time together, as this is one of our key areas of focus to making sure that this policy gets off the ground and is really fulfilling its potential to drive change in the quality of our educator preparation providers. So one of the first things that, and you'll see this later this afternoon, is making sure that there's a clear timeline for implementation of when the different components of this policy go into place. The next piece is really around the production of the annual report. So those are those more granular data reports that will be geared towards the providers themselves, and making sure that we're working closely with them on those metrics and on the production of those reports. And then finally, making sure that we've also got a very clear sense of when you all will be able to see the first programs come before you underneath this policy for review.
All right, so this is a conversation that I want to, or some questions I've got for the department this afternoon, but it also goes to the timeline. We got a timeline to ring the bell on outcomes by 2020. we know that success is primarily the teacher and the leadership. We know it, we say it, and not you. The timeline that's set out right now for the changes in teacher prep goes from now to 2019. Then I'm sure there's got to be a period after 2019 that once it's fully implemented, there will have to be several years of data to really to be able to look at a program to make a knowledgeable decision as to how they're performing. So now we're really looking at possibly an 8-year timeline. In another timeline that we are wanting to accomplish amazing things in 4 years. The two are not reconcilable. They don't work. They've got somehow or another, this thing has got to get condensed. The two don't work. So if we're really serious about one timeline, then we're going to have to really make the other one work. The end.
Just to add, I mean, I know we're gonna have a lot more conversation on this later. I don't disagree. I think we need to really look and see where we can tighten. And I think there are interim measures that are not inconsequential. I mean, you know, if the data in year 1 is bad enough, you can, for instance, tell a program they have to stop admitting candidates. I mean, you can start to pull the brakes, but I think those are the things we got to think about and work with and talk with the department about even today in terms of how we try to reconcile those timelines, at least better than currently they exist.
And I would just say, I mean, I think the one thing that might be some consolation to that, and I agree we should continue to ask hard questions about the timeline, is that the annual reports will start, the production of those will start before 2019. So there will be several years of data before we reach that 2019 point to be able to ask hard questions and make some decisions based on it.
But when I read it, in my mind, if I was a EPP, we call them, I would say really, it doesn't, I'm not under the gun until sometime after 19. There's 44 of these teacher prep programs. That's a whole lot of hires in a period of time that could be unfortunate.
We're kind of conscious of our time here too, so we'll just kind of take any changes, but save some of the comments.
I was just gonna say real quickly, I'll talk about the additional focus areas, which is number 4 before I turn it over to Philip on teacher licensure. So there are a lot of things that fall underneath this bucket of great teachers and leaders that we know and we've heard from the discussion that you all have had as a board are really of interest. And so wanted to make sure that a few of those were still captured here. So you can see the focus on human capital initiatives, alternative salary schedules, differentiated pay. That's been a lot of the discussion over the last couple of years. The second one is really around looking at our assessments for candidate requirements for licensure. So making sure we've got the right cut points and thresholds and the right exams in place and studying that information in a little bit more detail.
We're gonna add in content qualifications specifically based on Mike's feedback. If that,
content.
I think that's a good call.
Where are we at?
Where Laura is on
4.
additional focus areas, thoughtful consideration of qualification and entrance requirements for teaching. I'm gonna call out content expertise.
It's that second dash.
Got it.
Okay. Moving to license.
Nathan,
Let's go.
And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief on this section. The first 2 parts of it are a continuation of what we have been doing. The teacher discipline reviews are what we do every quarter with you. And I hope that the changes that we've implemented in the past 6 months with giving more information have been useful. If there's any additional information that would be helpful, things that I haven't been including in the past that you might like to know on each case, let me know and I will try to add that to the packets you get. The second part with interacting with LEAs, that's something that I do more on a general daily basis, talking with people at HR and various LEAs and things of that sort. But the big thing that we want to highlight is the last part, which is developing some sort of disciplinary schedule so that we can put it in our policy and people can look at it and say, well, if a teacher has done X, then they will most likely get Y as a result. And we want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure that we're consistent across the board with how we react to teacher misconduct. And two, we want to make sure that the public and the schools, and parents and teachers can understand what is a consequence of an action. And so we just want to make sure that we're very open about what goes on and what happens. I'm happy to take any questions, but that's just a very general overview of what's going to happen this year.
I don't have a question, I just have an amen, and that I'm happy to help with that disciplinary schedule.
We've already got you on record from your.
Put it back on the record, and I do think it will be important to say in it that, you know, you have to have it individualized and there's flexibility, just like in the federal sentencing guidelines, all that stuff, but I think that is an absolutely fantastic idea. People don't know that you don't do X and still be a teacher, we need to make sure that they know it. I'm good.
Yeah, we're excited about that. Okay. Standards, I'm gonna turn it back over to Laura.
So I think you all have heard a lot about standards, so I'll be very brief here and just say that, you know, this obviously is a new key component of the board's work, but one that's really critical and really important. And we just highlight that I think that we've got a really good process in place. And so most of our work this next year is just going to be focused on executing the process that has been laid out for us and that we've been able to fine tune with the math and English language arts process. And we will finish up that process this year and then focus on science and social studies. Any questions about standards review or things that you feel should be added or edited in that category?
Questions? Okay.
All right.
Grading policies?
Grading policies and practices. So we'll have a presentation later on in the workshop. Elizabeth and I will do one on a policy audit that will really give you our most immediate next steps on this grading policies and practices piece. And then there's also another strategic or policy lever under the next category around a policy audit. But this grading policies and practices work is really kind of a key part of our first steps in that policy audit. So we've identified a subset of policies that are in need of some revision and in need of some updating. And we're working to, over the course of the next couple of months, to really take a close look, do a detailed internal review, as well as gather some stakeholder feedback before we bring a series of proposed revisions to the board, starting in April and probably continuing throughout the next few board meetings around this grading policies and practices work.
So yesterday, which brings us home to me, real, we had a slide over at THAC that had cohorts of kids with 3-point averages all across the board, 3+ point average. And above them were their ACT scores of 18. I don't know how you can have a legitimate B average and score 18 on the ACT. Now, I'm sure there's ways, circumstances, but not that many kids. And no wonder parents think their kids are ready to go to college. They got a B+ average. So we got to do that. Enforcement's going to be a fair.
We're up for the challenge.
I like the way you say it with conviction.
Michael called and talked to me about it offline several times, so we'll make sure.
Okay.
And then,
Anything else on policy audit? Member engagement?
All right, so public engagement and oversight, we're going to commit to good governance, effective oversight and engagement of the citizens of Tennessee. The policy audit, which she just briefly mentioned, that's something that the legal staff's been working on extensively, and we've taken advantage of Belmont School of Law. And we've had an intern, actually, I guess a law clerk, who's come and spent hours and hours and hours combing through our policies and all of the stuff, that finding what's out of date and moving forward with that. So that audit is certainly ongoing, and looking towards prioritizing those policies to our priority areas and making sure that they don't disagree, because we found several places where policies actually disagree with themselves. Something that obviously has become sort of a second nature to all of you over the course of this last year, and certainly throughout your time as service as state board members, is this issue of board member engagement. Certainly, we've been charged with doing what we can to make sure that each of you are as available to your constituents as possible. And part of that even is just as simple as the state email address and having that posted and being able to be there. One of the things we want to do this year is to make sure that we're documenting and sharing each of your regional engagements. I think we did 7 of the 9 districts had regional engagements. One was all set to go and got totally snowed out. But the days in the district have proven tremendous. I've gotten a great deal of very positive feedback, certainly from legislators you all have had the opportunity to meet with and discuss, with principals and teachers and these superintendent study committees that have been extraordinary. So a big thank you to those of you that have done that. And one of the things that we're thinking about maybe before we part company in this meeting is to be thinking about a day when you can pick for your day in the district. Obviously, the staff is ready to help. Had conversations this morning with our Madam Vice Chair to try to figure out when would be a good one for her. Thinking, the end of legislative session will probably be the second week of April or so, and that leaves some time during this academic year when we can meet up, come to the district, meet with superintendents in the morning. We found legislator lunches at noon, and then in the afternoon. In your case, we actually visited an extremely innovative co-located community college high school program where the students come out with a post-secondary credential as well as their high school diploma at the same time. So that's a piece there. Any questions on that before I get into our annual expenditures? Yes, sir.
One of the things we can do when we think about engagement in the district, let's look at where you have districts come very, very close to overlapping. 8 and 9 overlap. We can have a school that's in 8, but it's right there on the line of 9. Same thing with 7 and 8. And I think we can do that. I think we can make a lot of things happen. So let's be very prescriptive in how we lay that out, because we also have legislators who overlap within those districts. So I think we make that then. I think the other thing we need to add is looking at what we can do with the local editorial boards of the newspapers. Because going back to what Mike said, the more we can communicate what we're doing, what's on the table, the better. Because at the end of the day, and we have seen this in Shelby County and in Fayette with ASD and iZone, where the media has really become involved in trying to understand. So the more we can do that, I think the better off we will be.
Another point to make there, and wanted to thank Wendy. Wendy's was an extraordinary example of this. So her congressional district, while she kind of barely lives in the 7th congressional district, it goes well out into West Tennessee. So we spent a morning with the superintendents of Southwest Tennessee in Jackson, and then the afternoon was with Representative McDaniel, who represents Henderson County, and then schools in Henderson County. So when you have, and that's one thing I know, Cato, that we've talked about as well, the 8th district going up to Dyer County and some of those places in rural northwestern Tennessee, getting the members out to the sort of the reaches of their district that they're not normally in. All of those things are extremely important. Dr. Trout, you've got it easy.
I just wrote down that we need to get to Memphis again early next year, though, because Dr. Trout didn't actually get to be part of that, and we.
I worry about Dr. Trout. I mean, he can drive 4 miles. I mean,
Well, we kind of figured hosting us at Rhodes probably counts as all
For some.
the.
All right, Nathan, I'm gonna ask you to go on super speed.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go quick. Annual expenditures. So we're in the process, actually, this next week of finding out from the governor whether our budget increases are going to be included in the governor's budget. And then also going through the process of answering for the Senate Finance Ways and Means Committee all the questions that they have annually about our budget. And so one of the ways that we're going to make sure that you all have the information that you need is once the package is prepared for the Senate committee, it will also be transmitted to each of you. Okay, so I hope that will prove.
And we'll know next week about the governor's budget.
Yep,
Yes.
Monday.
So
Monday.
we've been told we're going to get a preview on Monday. I don't know how much they're going to swear us to secrecy. And then the governor's state of the state is that evening anyway. So if we're sworn to secrecy, it won't be but for a few hours. Also, an additional focus area is making sure that our website is up to date and far more interactive. Mackenzie's here, but she's been extraordinary with that as well as Vicky. A lot of folks have worked on making the website the better product that it is now, and I think you will see sort of a continuous improvement in that, as well as with our social media interaction, which is ticking up as we go now. All right, and I'll hush.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yes.
Sorry, you're the bearer of the shortage of time here now. Any last thoughts though on the last pieces of that priority area? I do think time is not indicative of the importance of the transparency and the engagement. I think that's huge, and it means everything for your ability to make good decisions as board members that reflect your stakeholders.
So if there's a budget that is different than what our current expenses are, we're gonna have to probably make some decisions.
Yep.
How does that affect our workload?
Well,
Well,
I'm
you
hoping
don't know.
I'm hoping that we won't have to make too many
So,
decisions, but if we do,
There'll probably have to be a conversation as to how we prioritize what we do.
absolutely. And so if that happens, we will be back on the horn with you guys very soon after we learn that news. My hope is that we won't have to make too many tough decisions, but if we do, you'll be hearing about some suggested ways to do that. So
Okay.
to let you know. One last comment, we're gonna be making the changes that were directed based on the conversation, and we can review that potentially later. I do want to say that the other thing that we've been working on that we debated about whether to include in this version or not is sort of a Gantt chart of color-coded by priority area, the things that, again, are big milestones for us this year across these areas that we just discussed. And again, that's going to help us track our work, something that we can share with you as well. We kind of decided to take it out of the sort of high-level plan, just because it's a little clunky there at the end, but we are working on sort of a high-level timeline that will reflect sort of the milestones across these areas. So hold us to it.
Okay. Good. Any other comments, questions on the master plan?
I just want to make one point. You know, the key policy levers that we have, nowhere does it say that those are for 2016. You know, we talked about that. I heard you say that this would be our plans for 2016, and I
Yeah.
didn't see that anywhere.
Okay, that is a good observation. If it is not clear, we need to go back and figure out a way to make that clear.
I'm sorry, but does this not make it?
It does. Well, I think, yeah, that's certainly on the cover page, but I hear what Carolyn's saying too. Maybe there's a way to further clarify when you get to that piece, because the first part is more 2020.
It's broad,
Yeah,
and so we go
That's
from that
true.
broad to this year, and we need to.
Mackenzie's nodding. That's a good observation that we'll try to figure out a way to fix.
Okay. Master plan, going on. Deb's, we're on the charter.
Yes, and I know that I stand between
We have a coffee break in
a
the next
coffee
room.
break and a restroom break, so we will do our best. But I also know that this is a huge work for us, so I want to give y'all an update about where we've been, kind of where we are moving forward. So just kind of recap since October and we last were together, what has happened. We have, as the board became an authorizer right before Thanksgiving, officially, of the two KIPP schools that were approved in October, we moved directly into preparing for authorization beginning in August 2017. So the first school that has been authorized is KIPP Primary, which is scheduled to open in 2017-18. KIPP Nashville Middle is scheduled to open in 1920. So the first thing we did was develop basically a 2016 work plan of how do we get ready for the authorization work. I am more than happy to sit down and talk to anyone who would like to have a further conversation of what is really in that work plan. Yeah. Additionally, I also have the document called kind of authorization questions that we need to answer. So that's really about how are we surfacing all of the responsibilities that we need to be able to undertake to be a high quality authorizer and really try to be as much of a model authorizer as we can be. And also making sure we have the capacity on our staff to do all of the responsibilities that we need. So kind of fleshing out all of everything and putting it all out on the table. Did you flip this slide? Oh, sure. Sorry. So the next thing that we've done multiple kind of meetings with both KIPP Nashville leadership team to begin that conversation around. I mean, this is a new authorizer for them too. So they need to kind of bring to us their experience under their current authorizer, and then so that we can then understand how will the authorization process work under the state board. We've also met with Department of Education team, and we'll continue to do so to really map out areas of kind of where would there be some assistance potentially, and also where are the capacities that we will need to bring for our LEA responsibilities in terms of kind of federal and state laws around being an LEA.
I want to note too that Kathleen is here specifically because she recognizes that partnership, and I appreciate her being here just to hear the conversation this morning. So yeah, they've been a great partner already.
And lastly, and this is just something that we are continuing to do, but we are continuing to talk to stakeholders, other authorizers, and specifically other authorizers who are also the LEA. That, if you look nationwide, it's in the minority to be an authorizer and an LEA, but we really want to be touching base with those folks who have that similar experience so we can really understand what do we need to be expecting, kind of being prepared for. So just continuing those conversations and those connections to make sure that we are really thinking about everything that we need to be prepared for come 2017.
Can I just say too that there's no one more than Tess that I trust to have a strong plan for the plan, which is about what we're doing is planning for the plan. And she has assured in every way, shape, or form my nervous consciousness that we are going to be ready because she's thinking of everything.
Thank you. It's true. So in terms of things moving forward and what you should be prepared for, upcoming next steps. As I mentioned during the master plan discussion, we will be bringing to the board for approval contracts with KIPP Nashville for the 2 schools. That's something Elizabeth and I have been working on. I know we discussed it briefly in September, but we continue to work with internally on what we need to have in the contract, because that's really what's going to hold schools accountable. We want to make sure we get it as right as we can the first time around. So we will be, hopefully, our plan is to bring that to you in April for your approval. Additionally, in April, KIPP Nashville leadership team will hopefully be coming to speak and do a short presentation to the board so that you all can meet them and meet potentially some members of their governing board, some students. We had hoped that we could do it this time, but there was a conflict, and so they were disappointed we couldn't make it happen for January, but definitely for April. We're just continuing to have the conversations with both KIPP Nashville and the department and other stakeholders that we need to, be building out what those processes will look like. And finally, around additional resources, as Sarah and Nathan were mentioning around the governor's budget, we understand that the current allocation of 1.5 full-time employees devoted to authorizing is not sustainable in terms of having a robust authorization office, as well as maintaining our high-quality appeal process. So we're looking at 2 potential options around kind of making sure that we have the right capacity. One of those is proposed legislation that's currently been filed around an authorizer fee. And for those who don't know, an authorizer fee is a percentage of the state and local per pupil that is held back by the authorizer for work directly relating to authorizing. That is something that if you look nationwide at authorizers, it's very common. I will say in the state of Tennessee, it is not as common. The ASD is collecting an authorizer fee, but most other authorizers aren't. But we have a bill to potentially collect up to 4% for an authorizer fee. Again, we want to be very strategic about how much we decide to collect and make sure that it is only used for authorizing and that we take as little as possible from a school because we know that directly impacts the operations of the school.
We can't say that enough. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's important that we are set up for success in this work, and I absolutely want us to have whatever we need to do this well. It's another area, though, that's very unknown. It's hard to know on the front end of authorizing what exactly we'll need. So we're really just trying to make sure we have access to the funds that we'll need to do it well. But in this case particularly, it's just important to note that on the authorizer fee, we would only take what we would need each year to do this work well. And I think we'll be very judicious in making that decision.
And then finally, kind of the tandem point is we have requested a budget increase specifically for authorization from the governor's budget, again, to hopefully be able to bring on an additional staff member to build out our team around authorization. And also just build out capacity around appeals. Because if we think about kind of back to that timeline, our appeal process would overlay with the opening of school. And we want to make sure that the appeal process stays high quality and also that we have high quality openings of school. So we just need to make sure that we are across the board set up for success. And that's the update. Happy to have questions, happy to talk individually offline about any of your questions, concerns, what we can do moving forward.
Any questions, comments? Okay, yes, thank you. Good work. Good work. Thank you. We're in great position there to manage that process. So that's helpful. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay, we'll adjourn this session. We'll begin the next session in what, 15 minutes?
At 11, and Phyllis has let me know there is a Panera sort of coffee and refreshment break in the side room where lunch usually is. So